Jacob, you're an online coach, a fitness coach. I want to know, you've dealt with elite athletes, regular athletes, all sorts. What are the main differences that you see between elite athletes and just regular people in terms of habits, routines, mentality?
Yeah, interesting question. I've been asked this question before a few times actually. And I think the main difference is the commitment and consistency of elite athletes versus just the everyday person. They generally got their habits dialed in and their routines. So both a habit and a routine is a behavior. The difference is that a routine is a behavior which is frequent, and a habit is a behavior which is automatic. So they're generally what you're looking for is good routines. You just want frequent behaviors because that's consistency. So the difference between an elite athlete and an everyday person is generally they've got their routines dialed in a little bit better.
Okay, and they've able to convert them into habits.
Yeah, and then they convert them into habits. And so what's actually happening is, so we're going to dive in really deep, I think, here into the neurophysiology of it all. But there was the Nobel Prize in some area, I think it was physiology or something, in about 2014 was won because they found that the way that you create what happens with a habit is that the cell, so you've got two cells, so you have like two neurons, and in between the two neurons you have the synaptic cleft. And so you have this transfer of neurotransmitters from one cell to the next. So serotonin, say for example, which is a feel-good chemical, goes from one neuron to the next through the synaptic cleft. So when you change a habit, your body is used to receiving a certain amount of these different chemicals like serotonin. And so let's just say with my knuckle, I've got the receptor sites on one neuron, so 1, 2, 3, 4 knuckles. And so let's just say for simplicity's sake, there's 4 serotonin neurochemicals which come out into the synaptic cleft, and they're picked up on the 4 knuckles on the other side, the receptor sites on the receiving cell. When you start to exercise more often, you will start to have an increase in chemicals like serotonin as well as endorphins and that kind of thing. So what will happen is that there'll be like a bit of a backlog in the synaptic cleft of serotonin. And so the body needs to get that in, needs to move it on. It doesn't like it, it can't sit there. And so I kind of liken this to like a little bit of a nightclub doors. And so what's happening is you've got the bouncers on the door saying, we need to let people in. We've got like more people this Saturday night than we're used to. Just hold your horses, guys. We'll get you in. Just wait. And so it needs to take time. If that happens once off, it's fine. It kind of gets that backlog served. But if you then follow it up the next day and the next day and the next day, what's happening is you've got this continual influx of serotonin sitting in the synaptic cleft, wanting to get through to the other side, to the neuron on the next side. And this is happening millions of times through neurons in the body. And so the bouncers essentially are saying to the owner of the club, hey, we need to build more doors. We've got so many more people coming at the moment. We need to build more doors. And so the body is always listening into what's happening inside it and making changes. And so what then happens is the body then starts to create new receptor sites. So these new knuckles on the hand here, on my little analogy. And that takes time. It generally takes about 4 weeks for that process to occur. And what happens, and this is where these people won this Nobel Prize in this area, is that the cell actually quivers, it shakes. We can't feel it, but we can sense it. And so we get this like quivering of these neurons because they're trying to create new receptor sites. And so usually when people are falling off the wagon, it's generally around, with creating a new habit, it's generally around that 4-week mark. And so once you can get through that, then it's much easier to get to the next sort of milestone, which is the 12 weeks.
And after you reach the 12 weeks, do more doors open?
Well, so habits they don't listen to us. They just go, they don't just get to, because a lot of people do a 12-week challenge and think, oh, I'm going to lose, say, 6 kilos in the next 12 weeks. And so they go and train and they think that that's it. They can just switch off after that. 12 weeks, in terms of creating a habit, it is a continual process. And so it's not that you get to 12 weeks and then all of a sudden it's a habit. It's more that you have got more receptor sites there now ready to absorb more. So yeah, if you continue to flood the area with more serotonin over, from weeks 5 to 8, then your body is going to continue to make more receptor sites. And then if you continue to flood it with more serotonin from weeks 9 to 12, then it's going to create more. So yeah, it is going to create more and more. And ultimately, this is what's happening with someone who has made exercise a habit, because they're used to receiving X amount of serotonin. And so when they don't get it, they go, I just need to exercise. I don't know what it is, but I just feel the need to exercise.
Wow.
There's a few different things going on, but that's one of the main things.
Cool. Wow, that's interesting, because there's also, I heard the other day that when someone's tired, if they're a coffee addict, for example, rather than using the term I am tired or I feel tired because I didn't get amount of sleep or I didn't do this the night before, it's I need coffee. And so probably for the elite athlete who's lacking their serotonin because of the lack of exercise, their instant response is I need exercise.
Yeah, because they've essentially made it a habit. Interesting thing on sleep actually is that in sleep, people talk about the purpose of sleep being that, you process your dreams. It's a storage filing type process. But what the most important thing that happens during sleep is the waste disposal. And so you are getting rid of the waste products in the brain. So just through simple thinking and feeling, we have all different chemicals in the brain. And so through that process, we then, because of like biology, we then end up with these waste products. And so during sleep, what happens is the cerebral spinal fluid swells by up to 20% in the brain. So we don't have a lymphatic system above the neck. So the lymphatic system, which is the body's waste disposal system through the body, pretty much runs parallel with the circulatory system, stops at around the neck level. And then above that, up in the head, because there's not enough space, the brain is so big and that we want to maximize our brain capacity. So the brain takes up maximum amount of space in the skull. And so in order to not have a whole second system like the lymphatic system in the brain, the body's ingenious way of removing waste products is to increase cerebral spinal fluid, CSF, into the brain. It allows it to get into all the little nooks and crannies of the brain and then remove it. And so when you get a bad night's sleep, what happens is you get a buildup of waste products. And so let's just, I love my analogy, so let's liken this to a restaurant. And so imagine, the restaurant does its night's, service, and then at the end of the night, it goes and puts the rubbish out the back for the rubbish man to come and collect the next morning, but he doesn't come. One night, not too bad. 2 nights, it's starting to get a bit smelly out the back there. 3 nights, starting to get a bit smelly. And so this is what's happening when you are not getting sleep night after night. You're essentially getting accumulation of waste products, so rubbish, which is then building up. And so that's why you're not being able to function optimally, because you've got this. So you need to get not only the right amount of sleep, but the right quality of sleep. So at the right time of day for you, depending on what type. We're getting into kind of like sleep animals here. This is Dr. Michael Bruce stuff. We can go down that path if you like, but you need to be getting sleep at the right time of day for you so that you can remove those waste products. And then ultimately, you don't be needing coffee to get yourself up and going, because it's just an artificial source.
Yeah. What's the optimal amount of hours of sleep?
Well, generally, it's anywhere from 7 to 9. But Dr. Michael Bruce, who's a sleep researcher, has classified people as one of 4 sleep animals. So you've got a bear, a lion, a wolf, and a dolphin. And so bear makes up 50% of the world population. That's what I am. And they generally sleep from about 10 p.m. to about 7 a.m., which is about 9 hours. Then and this can be sort of half an hour to an hour either side of that. Then you've got your lions, which are typically like to go to bed early. So they might go to bed about 8:30. They're the ones that like to wake up early. So they might be waking up around like 5 o'clock. They could quite easily wake up at 4 and get up and just be full of energy training. Generally, those type of people end up in roles like CEOs or in the military. Then you've got your wolves. Your wolves like to go to bed a little bit later, so they might go to bed about 11 o'clock or midnight, and then they like to sleep till 9. This is in normal conditions, not when you have to get up for work the next day or you're sitting up watching TV. So this is when you naturally want to fall asleep and wake up. And those wolves are the type of people that can quite easily sleep until lunchtime. And then you've got your last one, which is your dolphins, and they kind of generally, this is not taking into account insomniacs or anything, any kind of like disorder with sleep, but these are the people that only make up about 2% of the world population, and they generally don't need a lot of sleep. So they could go from 1 till 4 in the morning and be fully rested. So that was an extra one that he created. But if you're interested in that, Google Dr. Michael Bruce. That's really interesting.
1 till 4.
Yeah.
And then at what time are they waking up?
I think it's from 1 a.m. to like 4 a.m. So they generally don't need a lot of sleep. I think there was a big enough population size, being 2%, that he decided he would make this extra group. But generally, most people are going to fit into those 3.
Yeah.
You'll hear people say, oh, that's me. I don't need a lot of sleep. I don't get a lot of sleep. But they're probably like super tired and using coffee or some other drug or stimulant of some form, to energy drink, for example, to get themselves up and going. These are the people that legitimately don't need a lot of sleep.
Do you drink coffee?
I do, and I love it. I don't drink it because I feel like I need it to wake myself up. I do have an espresso in the morning only because I love the taste. You hear these people talk about their morning routines, and there's a big thing at the moment about like wait until 2 hours or an hour and a half for all these other hormones and neurotransmitters in the body to like absorb the caffeine. I just want to drink my coffee because I love the taste of it. In saying that, I'm definitely addicted to it because if I don't have it, I will get a headache by about 2 a.m. So I've tried to break that a few times so that I'm not constantly addicted to it. But I just love the taste, just black coffee. No sugar, no milk, nothing, just black coffee.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny because when I drink coffee, I get a headache. So
really?
I try and stay away from it as much as possible. So when you don't drink it, you get a headache. When I drink it, I get a headache.
Yeah, which is not good. I don't like to admit it. I don't like the fact that I am reliant on something. But yeah, sometimes if I drink too much, definitely I'll get a little bit of a headache. But I'd have to have a lot, you know. Generally, and it's more for me, it's the anxiety. Like I'll start to get jittery, like that shaky, and it's anxiety, mentally, it's anxiety.
Yeah. Going back to the serotonin stores, just to clarify, serotonin is the happy chemical in your brain. I'm wondering whether if once you build up as many stores, a decent amount of stores, are you able to control the influx of serotonin? Someone like Wim Hof has been studied and researched, and he's able to control his emotions. Can a regular person kind of control the amount of serotonin they're getting in and when they're getting it in?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not going to comment on that too much because I don't know for sure. I'm not sure if you can control the amount that you're getting in, but you can. He's crazy. Like, that's unbelievable. And I've done some of his breathing, and it's the best meditation I've ever done. I've never felt so relaxed from the simple breathing. Like, he's got an app, which is about $10. Yeah. It's expensive for an app, but it's the best $10 I think you'll spend on any app. And you do this, 30. So have you done it?
I haven't done it. My parents are currently doing it. One of my friends has done it and they love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got a client who just competed actually in the Catherine Ultra Challenge who was doing it, and he's right into it, and he got really serious with it. And he was saying, we were talking about going to those limits, where, because what you do is you breathe in and out for 30 seconds following his voice or tone. And then, like, there's a tone that is on the app. And then at the end of it, you breathe everything out, and then do you breathe everything out or you hold it? No, you breathe everything out and then you just hold it. And my record was about 3 minutes. And there's points there sometimes around the 2.5 minute mark and beyond where you start to convulse, like you start to shake.
Really?
It's crazy, but it's kind of scary.
I've seen a few videos of people actually getting seizures from it. But Wim Hof is there, like they're doing it with Wim.
Yeah.
And he just like grabs them on the neck, gives them a bit of a pat on the chest, and then they're fine. It's like, I don't think it's a serious one. They say they've just went into a deep meditative state.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks intense.
Yeah, well, the guy who I was just referring to, who I was training, he said that you can get past that. If you can get past that point, it's almost like this place of nirvana. He said the feeling you'll get is like, it's just this nirvana. It's this crazy, peaceful, relaxed feeling. I'm too scared to get to that point, but
really,
it sounds pretty cool. Like it's amazing. Like, and he's doing it, like in cold water, and he's going underneath water, and he's able to get stuck underneath ice sheets and then still get himself out, because he's just able to control his breathing. I don't think he's controlling his serotonin release or anything like that. Maybe as a result of controlling his breathing, it's then controlling his release of neurochemicals. But definitely, if you can learn to control your breathing, you can control your heart rate. And so then you're slowing that down, and then you reduce that stress, which is cortisol, which is going to be released, as well as adrenaline. And then, so yeah, maybe you can control your serotonin.
Yeah. Well, I think they discovered that Wim Hof was one of the only people researched that could.
Yeah, really.
Which was, fascinating. Like it was a groundbreaking experiment that they did.
Yeah.
What about the benefits of ice baths then?
Oh, there's definitely lots of benefits. Real quickly though, on Wim Hof, do you know why he got into...
No.
So his wife committed suicide, and he was in so much pain that he just went out and just started jumping in frozen water because he lived over, in I'm not sure what country, Netherlands, I think, and there was cold, freezing water around everywhere. So he went and started jumping in it because he was trying to remove the physical pain that he was and mental pain that he was feeling from his wife committing suicide. That he was like, nothing can hurt me as much as this, and then that's how he sort of started to get into it. Yeah, but yeah, to go back to the ice baths are very effective. I believe there's some people that do say that then, they're not effective. I think that's a small minority, but yeah, I think ice baths are highly effective for, if not just physical recovery, just for like mental strength.
Yep. Yeah, I've been trying to do them recently. The initial plunge in, and then I've been trying to control the shivers. I think Andrew Huberman's done a bit of research on the initial breathing the influx of breathing once you get in, and then hopping out and not immediately wrapping yourself in a towel or getting in hot water, just controlling those shivers, and then even going back into cold is a proven way of getting rid of fat quite effectively.
Yeah, well, I don't know too much about the fat removal. I have heard of it. I don't know exactly what's going on. I would imagine, some kind of thermogenesis. But, when you see the people that are doing these types of things, where they do it for 30 days, they do like a 30-day challenge, and you see what they're like on day 1 compared to day 30, it's crazy. They just get in there and sitting down and just chilling.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Wim Hof is... he does the ice baths, but then he's going in a freezing tank, like he's doing runs in ice. I think he went to Antarctica and walked along there shirtless. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show that mind over matter, that the human body is capable of so much that the majority of people don't get to that point. But I think what's important to note is Wim Hof has got to that point from years of consistent training. Like it's not just a one-off thing. It's something he's been doing for a very long time, and he's been doing it consistently.
Yeah. You've worked with, moving topics, you've worked with AFL teams as well, Richmond and Collingwood, I believe.
So I was working with one of the Richmond female players who was coming back from ACL. That was pretty cool. That came about, I think, so I was working with the Adelaide Crows. That's a interesting story how that even came about with their Darwin-based players. So there was one initially, then there was 2, and then they were saying, can you look after these other girls that we're looking at drafting as well? And so there's a few people that came along through that. That was over 3 seasons, and in those 3 seasons there was a grand final loss, unfortunately, a grand final win, and then not making the grand final, making a prelim. So it's pretty successful 3 years. Adelaide Crows at this point, after I think there's been 8 seasons, is the most successful AFLW team in the competition, having won 3 out of about the 8 premierships. And then from there, I knew a girl who was one of the strength and conditioning coaches at Richmond, and they had a player who had done her ACL, and they said, can we send her to you to do that? So they gave me just complete open to do whatever I wanted. They said, we'll send you a program, but we trust you. You go and do whatever you see fit. And so, that was pretty cool.
How'd you land that gig?
Just connections. That's how it always works, so it all goes back to, I was working with a local football club here, Wanderers Football Club. There was a guy Paul Motlop was the coach at the time. Dean Rioli came on as an assistant coach halfway through the season, and he said, I'm looking for a head coaching job next year. I want you to come with me. And so I went with him. He got the job at Palmerston Magpies, and so I went with him. And he was really smart with the way he went about it. So he, rather than go in and get paid as the head coach, he went in with a coaching group. And so he put his group together and said, this is what we all cost to the club. So there was him as the head coach. I was the second highest paid actually in the whole club as the fitness coach. And then there was 2 assistant coaches. And so I worked with him for 2 years. After the 2 years, the job came back up at Wanderers, and he was interested. I feel like we'd done what we could at Palmerston to build the club up to then be taken over from there. And so I was pretty happy and proud of that. Then we went back to Wanderers, played in 2 grand finals, which we lost both of them to St. Mary's. And then having worked with Dean was then the manager of Danielle Ponta. And Danielle was playing with the Adelaide Crows. And so when they were looking at signing her, Adelaide and Gold Coast were both in sort of a battle to get her signature. And there was a meeting with Phil Harper, who's the Adelaide Crows football operations manager, Dean and Danielle. And Phil could see that Danielle, family was a big thing to her. And he said, if we sign you on a contract where you can live in Darwin for half the week, like for example, Monday to Wednesday, would you sign? And she couldn't get, apparently the story goes that she couldn't get the pen fast enough. So then as soon as she signed, Phil turned to Dean and said, oh, well, now we need to get someone to look after her in Darwin, to look after her fitness program. And, you know, kindly Dean goes, I got the guy, give this guy a call. And so Dean said, you know, what are you doing with yourself? I said, oh, you know, just teaching PE, just started at Darwin High at the time. And he then said, well, Adelaide Crows are going to call you keen. I was like, can I swear on this?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. So I was pretty excited. And then Phil calls up and he goes, oh, you know, thanks for doing this for us. And I'm like, what do you mean thanks for doing, like, no interview, nothing? Don't you want to speak to me? Like, send my resume or something? And he was like, no. He goes, you come, you know, like highly recommended by Dean, and we respect Dean and his opinion. So, you know, we're happy to do it. Like, just tell us your price. And I'm like, I actually said to him, no, I'll do it for free. I was like, I'm happy to do it for free. And he goes, nah, man, like, we're going to pay you. And I'm like, no, I got a full-time job. It's all good. Like, I'm happy to do it. And he goes, go away, have a think about what you want to charge. We're going to pay you. And so I was like, okay, yeah, cool. So that was awesome.
Brilliant. And what was some of the key takeaways that you took working with the players and even the coaches?
Culture, number one. First and foremost, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Adelaide Crows women's team is culture. And that's what I took away from it is they had a saying, family first. And so if someone had a wedding, they weren't playing like that weekend. If they, like, family always came first before everything. Anytime they needed something, it was always family first. So, and because of that family first mentality, they built this incredible culture. The funny story which Phil was telling me one day was that when they started the AFLW, they thought that Adelaide was going to be one of the two worst teams, and or the worst team in the comp. And so the AFL was talking to Phil, and they said to him, well, we think you're going to be the worst team, you know, rah. And he goes, okay, well, who's the second worst team? And they said, we think it's going to be GWS. And he goes, all right, well, put us against GWS round one, and then I don't care. They played GWS, they won it, which was what he wanted to get some momentum. And then they went from there and, you know, obviously grew this incredible culture, this incredible team, and then have been so successful.
Is that something that you've tried to implement into your own family? I know you've got 4 kids. Is that something that you've adopted from that team?
Yeah, I think so. It's something that I'm always working on myself still, you know, making sure that it is family first, but definitely it's something that I've adopted myself first is family first, like family before everything. And
how did you go about creating training regimens for these players? What was, you know, obviously they'd already had probably intense routines and structures that they did. How do you as a coach go in and say, okay, this is what I do, you know, I'm going to put you on this and this program. How does that work?
Well, the Adelaide Crows strength and conditioning staff send the program, and I would then implement that. But I had, same with the Richmond deal with the ACL, I had full control to be able to modify it as I saw fit. And so they would send their program. This is what all the girls are doing, so that each of the girls would have like a strength program that they were following. So they'd be in different groups depending on where, like how experienced they were, how many years they'd been sort of in the system, if they were like just been drafted, or if they were only in their first or second year, or if they were in their, you know, 5th year. And so they would send their gym program, and then they would also send their conditioning program, and that would consist of, you know, like some speed, some agility, and then some running stuff. The one thing I noticed with Adelaide was they would do this running set at the end of most sessions, which was crazy. Like, it was just repeat effort running, which would probably be good for a cricket batter actually as well. But it was this... It was just teaching them to gut run and to be able to turn and run back, you know. So if you're all running forward in attack and all of a sudden there's a turnover, you can all get back and defend. And so it generally was like this 10, 20 or 30 second type thing, which would go for, say, 6, 8, 10 reps. There'd be 3 sets of it, and there'd be a range of cones about 1 metre apart, depending on the distance, which was all set from their 2K time trial. That there, I think, is what made Adelaide so fit. So 2 years ago when I was involved with them, they would have been up there as one of the 2 fittest teams with Melbourne, and I truly believed it was because of that. So the Crows staff would send the programs and then I would then just implement them. But I would always change stuff based on what I'd done previously, what I wanted to try. So we were doing all sorts of things. Like we were juggling, like we were pair juggling. We were doing stuff with balls. We're doing these agility things, like where I'd be calling out random things. I'd be trying to like get Danielle to like dusty me off kind of thing in like an agility drill, like just having fun with stuff as much as possible.
Yeah.
And you got to do that. You got to artificially do that when it's just you and one sort of player or you and only a few players, because you don't have that, that vibe that you get from a team.
I think the running that you mentioned at the end there, that throughout my cricket career, I did that and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. But one thing it teaches you is we need this as a team to perform our best. And it's something that a lot of other teams don't do to the best of their ability, mainly because they hate it. And the coaches know they hate it. And sometimes coaches go easy or they don't have the, fitness trainers on hand. Another thing it teaches you is that no one's going to care if you're left behind. Like if you're running a 2K time trial and you're running a 9-minute or 8-minute 30, the others are doing 6 minutes, 50 or 7 minutes 20, you're behind and you're fully accountable. So yeah, seeing that in the AFLW, seeing that in fitness teams growing up was something tremendous for me.
Yeah. Well, and so doing it like that, you're not really leaving anyone behind like you are in a 2K, because you're only running up, say, 20 meters, 30 meters, 40 meters or whatever. So it's up. You get a very short break up and then you come straight back, and then a little bit longer break, but still pretty short. And then you're going again. So it's almost like a bit of a beep test type thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
How do you go on the beep test?
I haven't done one for a while. I've kind of mucked around at school with one. My best for a long time, I did athletics as a main sport as a teenager, and my best was mid-11s. And then when I went to uni, we had to do a beep test, and I'd stopped doing athletics. I'd gone and started playing football. I was just doing 2 trainings a week, nothing special, and swimming. And I'd done surf lifesaving, and so I'd done some swimming previously, but I was doing swimming specific training, and I ended up running 14.2 on the beep test. So I went up by 3 levels, having not done being able to break, that mid-11s. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I realized it was the swimming, and in particular, hypoxic swimming. So now, anytime I do anything aerobic with someone, whether it's a football player, a long-distance runner, or someone who wants to train for a beep test because they're trying to get into the police force, for example, always swimming.
Is it the quickest way to build fitness?
I think so, yeah. 2 days a week, I reckon. And if you do that for 4 weeks, then, you will improve it dramatically. Because what's happening, are you happy for me to go here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what's happening in the body is as soon as because I went away and Googled it and I started looking into it, and then I came across an old Modern Athlete and Coach, which is a track and field magazine that I subscribed to as an athletics coach. And there was an article in there explaining what was happening. And so when your body is in water, there's pressure against your body in the water. Your body is actually being squashed. It's being compressed, and your body needs to push back to not to be squashed. There is pressure on us when we're out here in everyday life. It's just air pressure. It's just minimal, and we're used to it because we live in it. But as soon as you jump in water, there's pressure. It's trying to actually squash you. And so the deeper you are, the more pressure there is. So if you're vertical in the water, there's more pressure at your feet than what there is around your chest. But let's just say if you're swimming freestyle, you're horizontal on the top of the water, there's an even disbursement of pressure on your body. So what's happening is, because your body is being compressed, there's less room in and around your capillaries. So oxygen goes in through your lungs. It then goes from your I'm going to stuff it up, in your alveoli, the smallest little air sacs in the lungs, and it diffuses through the capillary wall into the bloodstream, goes around the bloodstream, delivers oxygen to the muscles, picks up carbon dioxide, comes back, and then from the bloodstream through the capillary wall back into the lungs, and then breathes out. So that space where the oxygen and carbon dioxide is diffusing through the capillary wall is being squashed. And because there's less space there for that process to occur, it has to become more efficient. So that's the main reason why you become more aerobically fit, because you become more efficient at that process.
And that process, to that extent, isn't happening during just running.
It's not being squashed. No, ultimately, it's kind of what's happening at altitude. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking altitude, if a place like Darwin where we don't really have any altitude, and you're able to artificially created in a way in the pool.
How does the weather, I guess, in Darwin compared to colder places differ in terms of aerobic fitness?
Well, you usually fatigue quicker. So I was lucky enough to be a participant in a study with Dr. Matt Brearley, who was at the NT Institute of Sport. He was an exercise physiologist and he's a heat expert. And so he's done a lot of work with like supercar drivers in particular who were sitting in cabins of 50 plus degrees Celsius. And so we did a hydration test and we did a cooling test. And so it was a 45-minute bike ride on a stationary bike. It was replicating wet season conditions. So I think it was about 35 degrees and about 80% humidity. There was solar lamps on top of your head that was so close. It was burning on top of your head. And then you had everything on you. So you had like little gauges on you measuring sweat, other gauges measuring superficial body temperature, a rectal thermometer measuring core. It was before the days where they had the pills you could swallow. So you actually had to put the thermometer up your bum and then tuck it out the back of your shorts and then like plug it into the machine on the side while you're riding. And then you're riding. Luckily, you were so stuffed from the session that the bride very quickly that you couldn't even feel it.
Wow.
But it had to go about 10 centimeters in, just in case anyone wants to know. So that was interesting. But there's all these things. So there's all this stuff on you. And then there was a VO2 max mask on. And where was I going with this? So we had to do this like 45-minute bike ride. And then at the end, you would then jump into, you would have some form of cooling. And so they tested cold air jacket, which was what the army would use on training. So there was actually a box aircon connected to this green army looking vest. It just blew cold air. That did stuff all. Yeah. And thank goodness the results showed that too, but it felt like it was doing nothing. Then there was the ice jacket, and then there was full water submersion at 10 degrees, which was like considered the optimal. And man, the ice bath one, like the 10 degree, like cold water submersion was so good. Like you just felt like you recovered straight away. I think we were in there for about 6 minutes afterwards and you just felt so much better. The cold air jacket was the one that they considered to be the most effective because I think this was probably like early 2000s maybe. It was before the 2004 or 2008 Olympics, and the Australian hockey team, the Hockeyroos, were in Darwin, and so they were actually laying in little ice bars on the side of the pitch during training. So they were training like from 10 a.m. to 12 midday in like the build up in sort of like September, October, and then they'd come off. They would leave everything on, and they would just lay back, feet out of the little baby pool, and then just lay in it so that their torso was in water, and then jump back up and then keep going. But that wasn't always possible. So the next best was the cold air jacket. So that became kind of the recommended cooling for the Hockeyroos at the Olympics that year.
Sure. And okay, so when you fatigue quicker, are you gaining fitness, or are you literally just fatiguing quicker and you're less able to recover, in turn leading to less fitness?
Yeah, well, I always wondered this, and I always kind of thought that, okay, well, if I'm going to do, running in Darwin, that surely I'm fitter than those down south because I'm training in harder conditions. But because the conditions are harder, you're not able to push as hard. So generally, it is better down south where the conditions are a bit cooler. So there are benefits where you can get from the heat acclimatization training, where you come up, you do that in a pre-season for like a week, for example, 2 weeks, and then you go away. I think the benefits last a few weeks, maybe 4 weeks, possibly 6 at most. Don't quote me on that. I'm not too sure, but it doesn't last forever. But you do get that benefit. And then if you can the idea is you then take that benefit and continue to train hard after that to keep that going. But in general, people who are down south in more optimal conditions where it's like low 20s and not so humid, they're able to actually do more work because they're not fatiguing due to the heat and humidity. It
was insane. When I went to Adelaide for a year during boarding school, this was when I was preparing for my 2K time trials, and I was doing it in Darwin at the time as well. But in Adelaide, it felt like it was just a cruise compared to Darwin. Like I was running laps of the oval, and I was doing the same time, the same distance, but I was able to go more. Another question relating to running. In terms of the beep test and, running 2K time trials and whatnot, there's always a stage at the end that I feel that I was able to go more. And I think everyone who finishes the beep test says that. There's a 5-minute period after there, probably 30 seconds after you're cooked. And then after that, you say, oh, I could have gone more. I could have gone one more or two more, 10 more. Is that a brain response, or is that an actual physical response that you're feeling, that you actually could have gone more?
You know what? I don't actually know, but what I think is going on is I kind of have an issue with the beep test. In that, and I literally only just did a story on this like half an hour ago. The limiting factor in most people is the upper leg, so the quads in particular, upper leg fatigue. Because you are having to decelerate, turn, and accelerate every 20 meters, it's the legs that are fatiguing. And the test is supposed to be a cardiovascular test. And I don't think you are purely testing cardiovascular endurance because of that. So that's why I think the yo-yo is a better test of cardiovascular endurance, or just go and do a 2K time trial or a 12-minute run. So same thing, 2K time trial, 12-minute run. You just one you're measuring distance, one you're measuring time. I think you're better off doing that. And the most popular is the 2K. Are you getting that though in a 2K as well, or just in the beep test?
I would say that's a good question. Maybe not to the extent I'm getting that in a beep test, but maybe in a 2K as well. I see what you're saying in terms of your legs are just drained after a beep test. Like they feel heavy. Maybe your breathing isn't as bad, but you just physically can't go further when you decide to stop. In a 2K, I'm pretty hammered at the end for a good while after that.
Yeah.
And I'm happy it's over. So maybe it is just in the beep test.
Yeah, that's my inkling. That's what I think it would be.
Yeah. Let's talk weight loss. What are some common myths or, misconceptions that you see in terms of people trying to lose weight that are coming to you?
That it's a quick fix, first of all, and then it stops after 12 weeks, as I alluded to at the start of the episode. It's something that, in the times that I was working with weight loss people, the thing I could always tell who was going to be successful and who wasn't very early on. And I would do this wellness consultation and ask these questions. And anyone who came to me and said, often they needed multiple attempts as well, because they needed to build up emotion, because we're all emotional beings. Our behavior is driven on emotion. We're more, I think Tony Robbins says, we'll do more to avoid pain than what we will to gain pleasure. And so you have to build up enough pain to a certain situation to do something about it. But then once you've done something about it, you then need to continue on with these new behaviors. You're creating all these new behaviors, because the person who you were here at, say, 10 kilos overweight needs to act in a different way to the person that you are here that is at an ideal weight. And so when people would come to me and say, like, I've tried a few times, that was usually a good sign. But the main thing was that this is a long-term thing for me. And so when I would say, how long are you looking at doing this for? They would say at least 12 months. So if they were committing mentally to themselves for 12 months or more, then I knew that they were likely going to be successful. If someone said 12 weeks, chances are they weren't going to be successful. But usually what these people were saying, they weren't saying 12 months. They were saying, this is just a lifestyle change for me. Those people who had accepted it was a lifestyle change, and the reason why, like I just said, because they were then going to be changing their behaviors. So, and they create that environment, and often that environment is going and exercising and doing things with friends. It doesn't need to be doing weights or doing HIIT sessions. Yeah, those things work, but they're just two examples of what works. They're two strategies. It could be just going and starting to hang out with friends who do, walk a few times a week, or, you go to you do sessions together at wherever, gym or classes, whatever it might be.
How important is diet in this process? Can you lose weight without the other, diet and exercise?
You can lose weight without focusing on diet. It's unlikely, and you probably won't keep it off, because the saying goes, you can't exercise your way out of a poor diet. What I used to say usually was weight loss is 80% nutrition and 20% fitness. And I still believe that, but it's 100% underpinned by mindset. So what I meant by that was those people that came in saying, this is a lifestyle change for me. They were willing to change their everyday behaviors, their routines, and then ultimately their habits. They were the ones that are going to be successful, and they're the one that has to change. If you are not going in with that psychology base, that change of thinking, chances are you're not going to be successful. You can throw mud at the wall, and there might be some that sticks, and there's some that do, but generally you do need to change your diet as well. Yes, it does come down to calories in, calories out. Like, it's a simple mathematical equation, but not all calories are equal. There are others. And so what I mean by that is that you need to be eating, you've got your macronutrients, your 3 macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein, and fat, but you're looking for also your micronutrients. So these are your vitamins and minerals. And you are going to, so people, for example, say, oh, I eat low carb, or, I don't eat carbs, but they eat vegetables. Vegetables are a carbohydrate, same with fruit. They're just usually referring to not eating pasta or rice or bread. And what I refer to pasta and bread as empty calories. Yes, they are carbohydrate, but there's not a lot of micronutrients in them. So there's not a lot of vitamins and minerals in that, whereas there is in vegetables. So if you can eat a lot of vegetables as well as meat. So the 3 most filling foods are protein, fat, and fiber. So protein being, meat, obviously, beans if you're a vegetarian, but meat being a great source, whether it's red meat, chicken, fish. Fish has the added benefit of being really good with fat as well. Fat is your second one, so dietary fat. Fish is a good example. Avocado, coconut products. Let's not even get into saturated and unsaturated fat stuff right now, but like coconut products, olive oil, for example, and then your fiber, which is ultimately like from vegetables.
Sure. What about a sole diet on one of those things? So you said protein, you said meat. What about something like the carnivore diet in terms of weight loss or even muscle gaining?
I think you have to be careful on any diet where you are eliminating anything. The gut is made up of this flora, so your microbiome. And the way I see it is it's kind of like that old Secret Garden movie from back when I was a kid. And, you've got this, or The Land Before Time, that dinosaur movie, where you've got this really beautiful, actually, I think even Ice Age, they kind of go, there's one part where I don't know which number it is, where they go to this really beautiful place, where everything in some place with that crazy Aussie character guy, Buck, his name is. And anyway, I'm going off track. So there's this beautiful place where it's flourishing with like plant life and animal life and all this. And that's the way I see a healthy gut. If you can get a gut which is flourishing in its flora, then you can be healthy. And the best way to get that is to have a varied diet, eat as much as possible. I was actually lucky enough to interview Ben Angel, who wrote a book called Unstoppable. And he's a biohacker, and he was the one that, I had actually given up bread and pasta and stuff like that, and he was one that sort of got me back onto it. And that book's amazing. I highly recommend everyone read it. But you do need to have a varied diet.
What diet are you on at the moment? Are you still on the paleo diet?
I have tried the paleo. I've tried every diet just because I like science, and so I try and test myself out as a guinea pig on everything. And I've tried everything from keto to paleo to Mediterranean and everything in between. Paleo was the one that I liked the most, if I was going to refer to a diet. But right now, the way I eat is I wouldn't consider it a diet of any type. It's probably most similar to paleo, but I fast, and that's just because I've learnt to like fasting. If I'm really hungry, I'll eat at morning tea time, but usually that's at about 14 hours. And so the real benefits of fasting come beyond 14 hours. So between 14 and 16 hours, where one of the major benefits that I want out of fasting is autophagy, which is where your body starts to consume its own dying and decrepit cells. And so you're getting rid of them. And I think that leads to disease, having them sitting around in the body. Because the body's constantly processing food. And if it doesn't get a break, it doesn't get to do the everyday filing. Because if you think about like a receptionist, if she's constantly constantly sitting at a desk doing filing that's coming in on a daily basis, but not getting to the other stuff, then that's just sitting there, and it needs to be dealt with at some point. So when you don't have any food in your stomach, your digestive system to process, your body can actually do the other stuff that it needs, the really important stuff, like clearing up, the autophagy that I talk about. So I usually don't eat until lunchtime, and then my lunch is typically leftovers from the night before. So today it was some chicken in like a salsa thing that I'd have with some enchiladas, but I didn't have the enchiladas, it was just the chicken. Then afternoon tea, I went home, had an apple and a small packet of chips, cheese and onion. And for dinner tonight, it'll just be spaghetti bolognese. But I've only just started having spaghetti again. Before, it would have just been the bolognese.
Sure.
Or salad, like a lot of salad and vegetables.
Yeah. Fasting, I've done some research on fasting as well. It seems incredible. My friend did a 3-day fast just recently, and he said that he had a shoulder injury, which seemed to have pretty much completely gone away. He had some knee pain, which he's got a lot of flexibility in it now after the 3-day fast. The first day he felt a lot of energy, more than usual. Like he went to the gym. It was a really good workout. The second day, that energy seemed to sustain throughout the day. Like he's usually quite slouchy at work, but he was energetic. He was feeling good. The third day was the crash, but he kept going, and his body seemed to repair itself. Like it was unbelievable, and he recommended it to me. Have you tried something like that?
No, I haven't. But in fasting, I have noticed that before, when I would eat, I would have like Vegemite toast for breakfast or Wheat Bix or whatever. And I'd be like, if I didn't eat breakfast, my stomach would be in cramps by morning tea. I needed to eat. So by simply changing away from those foods and eating more of the filling foods, as I said, protein, fat, and fiber, so a lot more meat and vegetable, then I didn't have that anymore. I wasn't having those sort of empty calorie carbs that I referred to, like the breads and pastas. So now, because I fast do the 16 and 8 method, so don't eat during 16 hours and eat during an 8-hour window, I can quite easily, like I'll be hungry between 10 and 12, but if I can get to 12, I don't necessarily need to eat. And if I don't get a chance to eat at lunchtime, I can quite easily get till like 2, 3 o'clock even, and then be like, oh man, I haven't eaten yet. Oh, whoops, I forgot. And not need to eat. And usually I'll just go and eat just for the sake of eating so that I've had something before dinner. Otherwise, I could quite easily get till dinner time. And then essentially that's a 24-hour fast. So if you're doing the 16 and 8 method of intermittent fasting, it's quite easy to get to a 24-hour fast. You just need to get through that 14 to 16-hour window. My ex-wife, however, she wanted to try this master cleanse, which was popularized by Beyonce. And so that was 10 days of nothing but this one particular drink. And you could drink as much of it as you liked. So it was like a glass of water with, I can't remember how much, I think it was a teaspoon, but it was a small amount of cayenne pepper, a squeeze of honey, and some lemon juice. That was it. You could drink as much of it as you liked. And she made it to 9 days. What I learned from that is that we do not need to, as humans, eat as much as what we eat. I don't think that that's healthy. I wouldn't be doing that all the time. But what it showed was that we don't need to eat as much as what we eat. She found it really difficult around day 3 or 4. And she started to get a bit hungry then, which is maybe like the crash you're talking about with your mate at day 3. And then at around day 5 or 6 was when she started to struggle, but it was only because of the behavior, because everyone else in the family was eating. And so she would see us eating dinner at dinner time and she wanted to eat. So it was the behavior that she was missing out on. She wasn't actually hungry. And then at day 9, I think it just got all too much. Like I think she'd really pushed her mental strength as much as she could. And she just, more because of the behavior, I think she was a little bit hungry by that point.
Yeah.
But because of the behavior, I remember her saying like, should I eat? And I didn't want to say nothing because I don't want to, be blamed for it later. And I really kind of wanted to see her make the 10 days. And I said, do whatever you want to do, like if you want to. I was really concerned around day 3 and 4 because she was saying she was quite hungry. And I was almost like walking around behind her ready to catch her in case she fainted. But yeah, once I seen her get through it, I kind of just kept my eye on her and she just seemed fine. She never looked like faint. And then, like to get to 9 days, like just crazy. It was incredible to experience that.
That is insane because it is an addiction, isn't it? Food is an addiction. The more we eat, the more we think we need it. And the term breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I don't know what your thoughts are about it, but I heard that that was actually a slogan for a breakfast company that made that, and it seemed to have just stuck. Do you think that it's the most important meal of the day? Obviously, you don't eat it.
No, I don't think it's the most important meal of the day. I've heard that as well. I don't know. I heard that it was Kellogg's that made that slogan up along with one of their cereals. So I don't know if they did or not, but I truly don't think that it is. And you can do fasting any way. You can just that skipping breakfast is the easiest. If you skip dinner, it's difficult because you're going to bed on a hungry stomach, so it's a little bit harder. Whereas if you skip breakfast, you can kind of just keep telling yourself, "Oh, just get till lunch," you know.
Sure.
You can kind of work through it a bit better, and you can feel a bit nicer going to bed having had something in your stomach. There's a guy who I know who used to be called the No Breakfast Guy. His name's Adam Martin, and he wrote a book called Start Late, Get Light or something. And it was all about, he tried all these different like fasting techniques, and that was what he said, was that it didn't really matter how you did it, but breakfast was the easiest because you were then going to bed with a full stomach.
Sure. Yeah, I've been someone who's had breakfast my whole life. I've recently started not having it. It is crazy to see that, to see the mental change in thinking, oh wow, I actually don't need this. And then I've been trying to make it till 12, till 1 o'clock. And yeah, you get a little bit hungry, but as you said, if you push past that barrier, you can keep going. With the intermittent fasting routine, you said that the bad cells are being killed off at about 14 hours. Are you getting to that period before the bad cells are being killed? Are they being killed at a slower rate or less?
I don't think so. I think that it pretty much happens after 14 hours. It's not like 14 hours, bang, okay, let's start killing off these cells. Yeah. It's kind of a process, but I think generally there might be some that start to get consumed, but it generally takes that amount of time to get through the food which is in your digestive system. And then once you've processed that, then it can then get onto the other stuff. So it's just an automatic process that occurs in the body just does. What you just said something that made me think. What I would recommend with someone who's doing intermittent fasting is to don't just go straight from like I eat breakfast at 6 a.m. to then I'm not going to eat until lunchtime. Like do 1 hour kind of like a week, like over a week. So maybe eat something at a little bit the last minute before you walk out the door, depending on what you do for a job. Then maybe go like 8 a.m., then 9 a.m., then 10, then 11, then 12, and try it like that. Or maybe do a week at, say, if you normally eat at 6, then eat at 8 for a week, and then eat at 10 a.m. for a week, and then eat at 11 or 12 for a week, and just push it back like that, get used to it.
And just to explain this process of killing these cells, I heard that your body goes into a fight or flight reaction almost. It starts wondering what's happening. It starts getting into a defensive state, and then it automatically starts killing the cells. And fortunately for us, the bad cells are in the way first. Is that correct?
I'm not actually too sure.
Okay.
I haven't looked into it.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about supplements. What do you think about, usual supplements that people take in their routines and maybe some of the more out there supplements they take?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that are out there. I wouldn't personally recommend them, and I've been very, very vocal about not taking any supplements. Obviously, like I'm not massive, so I'm not like someone that's in the gym, like, hitting it like twice a day, every day. But I'm fit and strong, and I think a lot of people use supplements to supplement a poor diet, and you can't do that. So what I've always said is most people I don't think need supplements. I think the only people that really need supplements are elite athletes who are just trying to get that last little squeeze out of their body, or someone that is like trying to put on like incredible muscle, and so they want that, more muscle for athletic performance, whatever. So what I think most people need to do first is to optimize their diet. So I remember walking into the Institute of Sport here when I was about 18 or 19 and saying to Matt Brearley, actually, who I mentioned earlier, who was an exercise physiologist, not a dietitian, but I said, I'm thinking about taking creatine. What do you think? And he goes, I'll give you a supplement to take. Here, get a pen and paper, write this down. He's like, go and buy yourself a bag of full cream milk powder, get yourself a banana, get yourself some honey, pour it into a blender with some water and mix that up and drink that. So essentially it was just a banana smoothie. And what he was saying was that you'd get the protein from the milk powder, you'd get the sugar from the honey and the banana, and then that would give you your energy, and then you're then going to put on a bit more muscle kind of thing. So I think if someone does really, like if someone is a massive gym goer and they really want to put on size, creatine's not bad. I think that, like, I would recommend it. The other stuff, BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, is one which is really good. Even like just protein supplement is another one. That'd be the top three. If someone wants to put on muscle and you have optimized your diet first, you don't have to fast, but I think fasting definitely helps. And training fasted can also be beneficial. Then you are eating, your protein, your vegetables, you're getting your healthy fats, in particular, those three key things. And you are getting all your macros right, so you're not being depleted in any protein in particular. Then if you want to then take something like creatine, for example, I think you can. Some people do need to take supplements because they're deficient in things, and a dietitian might say, hey, look, you might need this or that, like a vitamin or mineral. And for example, magnesium is one that a lot of people can be deficient in. And so magnesium comes through from like vegetables, and vegetables get it from the soil. So magnesium is in the soil, it absorbs into the vegetable through the roots, and then we eat the vegetables. So if the soil has been over harvested and is deficient in magnesium, then so too is the vegetable, which then so too are we going to be. But we also sweat a lot. Magnesium isn't stored in the body. It's used in over 300 enzymatic reactions, so it's constantly used. It's probably the most commonly used micronutrient in the body, and then we don't store it. So a lot of people, particularly if you live in a humid climate like we do here in Darwin, and we sweat a lot, you likely, and if you're training a lot or working outside, you probably do need a magnesium supplement. So that's in that regard. But in terms of putting on muscle, as I said, BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, a protein supplement, and creatine.
What is creatine doing to your body?
Well, ultimately, it's like it's giving you energy. It's filling up the cells, and so the part of the cell that it's really affecting is the. I just had a loss of thought. It's where ATP is produced. It'll come back to me hopefully in a second, and it makes the cell bigger and plump, so more hydrated. And so when your cells are hydrated, mitochondria is what I was thinking. The mitochondria is where ATP is produced. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is like ultimately short burst of energy, which if you're doing weights like lifting reps, 6 reps or whatever or less, then that's using ATP as an energy source. Creatine is making those cells bigger and more hydrated, which then gives you more energy because the mitochondria is able to function more effectively, producing ATP. It also will then give you a bigger look. So you will generally on creatine look bigger and bulkier, but you won't necessarily be more defined because of that hydrated look of the muscles.
Does it almost get too much in some cases? Are you almost looking too bloated on creatine?
Oh, possibly you could.
Yeah.
But I think, it is a natural, it's a natural supplement. So I think, you're probably not. You would be able to tell the difference between someone who is on it versus someone who's not and done the same kind of stuff. But the way I would use creatine is to use it for a period of time, and then when you want to cut, then go off the creatine and then sort of spend a couple of weeks cutting in terms of the training program to give you that definition.
Yeah. What are you saying to someone who's been going to the gym for say 3 to 4 years now, is seeing the progress but not as much as they maybe like? Are you recommending something like creatine? Are you still saying diet? What are you saying in terms of their plan?
I would definitely still say diet. Make sure you've optimized diet. I would say consider it if you want. And then what I would say is probably just change up the program. So if someone wanted size, for example, one of the best ways I think to do that, so you can get hypertrophy, which is like muscle size, in different ways. I think a lot of people get hypertrophy through their reps, because obviously, people say 8 to 12 rep range. But I think well, hypertrophy you can get from just volume. And so you can manipulate volume in different ways. And one way you can do it is to increase your sets. So keep your reps low, keep them, say, 4 to 6 reps so that you're still able to lift really heavy, but then increase your volume through your sets. So let's just say, for example, someone's doing 5 sets of 10 reps. The weight you can lift for 10 reps is not going to be as much as the weight you can lift for 5 reps. So if you flip that and you now do 10 sets of 5 reps, that's still 50 reps in total volume. Both workouts are both 50 reps. So you got one where, let's just say it's bench press, and for simplicity's sake, you can lift 10 reps, like 80 kilos for 10 reps. So you do 80 kilos, you do 10 reps, and you do 5 sets of that. That's 50 reps in total at 80 kilos. But you might be able to lift 100 kilos for 5 reps. So you do 5 reps and then you do 10 sets of that. You've still done 50 reps, but they've been higher quality because you've done them at 100 kilos. So you're going to put on slightly more muscle, but you're also going to get that more defined look because you're going to have more strength, and you are actually going to be more functionally strong.
Are you still hitting hypertrophy at 5 reps?
Yes, because you are doing it through your sets. You're still getting hypertrophy because you're getting it in the total volume.
Sure. Yeah. And what about injury recovery? What about someone who's going to the gym frequently but is getting some lower back stiffness or legs? What are you kind of putting them on in terms of recovering efficiently?
Yep. So I would call this old-time strength methods, which I think is something really valuable to consider and to look into. And the other way I refer to this is end range strength. So that's where you take a muscle out to its end range and you cause it to contract. So you create a contraction, and what happens is the muscle fibers are at their limit, and then because you're causing it to contract at that point, there builds more tissue at that point, and so it gets stronger all the way to its full length. That is a very good way to remove injury when done correctly, and also to prevent injury. Not only will you bulletproof your body in terms of injury prevention, but you will highly improve your athletic performance. So examples of this, if you look at old-time strength methods, for example, I'm going to tell a little story here. So the squat rack was invented so that people could lift more weight. But then when it was put into commercial gyms, how do you go and do squats? You probably walk straight up to the squat machine, to the squat rack, stand underneath the bar, put the weights on, and then start squatting. If you're experienced, you know how much you can lift, but people who aren't experienced don't necessarily know how much they can lift, and then that's led to a lot of injuries. So because you don't have to self-load the bar onto your back, for example, because of the squat rack doing it for you, because you put it up, then you load the weights on, then you try and stand underneath it and go down and go, holy shit, like, can I do this? Or I can't get full depth or whatever. Then, it's done you a disservice. So old time methods before the squat rack, and by the way, the squat rack was invented so that people training for like Olympic events, like, lifting heavy weights or powerlifting, so they could lift really heavy. These were very experienced lifters. It's just that now everyone does it. It's just common. So in the old days, like 100 years ago, you would have had to self-load the bar. So there's an exercise called the Steinborn squat, for example, where you need to stand the bar up on its side. So you need collars on it to hold the plates on, then get underneath it, balance it on your back, come down, you're in a deep squat, full depth squat, and then stand up. So sometimes I even do that where that's all we do with some athletes. So we go up, come down, go down the other side, and sometimes even just touch. And often we need to put boxes there so it's not so low because they don't have the mobility through their back, through their hips, their knees, ankles to be able to get all the way down. So that's one example. There's a whole range of different ones with lower back. One of my favorites is the Jefferson curl, which is where you're peeling your spine off a wall, for example. And that's the look of it with a light dumbbell. People look at it sometimes and go, oh, no, that looks like I'm just throwing my back to the gods and just good luck. But if you build up through progression, then it makes you very, very strong. And so then you've got all different types. You've got pancake deadlifts where your feet are out really wide. You've got all sorts of things where even ones where you're challenging the body multiplanar. So you've got your frontal plane, sagittal plane, and transverse plane. And so you've got, for example, a bar in between your feet, 1 foot in front, 1 foot behind. You reach down and grab the bar, and then you pull it up between your legs. I guarantee you, trust me, I've done this with many people. Your arms are long enough, so it's okay. No one's going to hurt themselves. But you pull that up and then you then modify the plan of movement. So all this stuff, I think going back to some of these old time methods is very, very valuable. And if you can do it through breaking movement down in terms of building your body back up, so you go through the right progressions, it can be highly effective. And this is what I would do, to go back to your initial question about the back, to fix someone's back.
Is mobility now less than what it was, say, 20, 30 years ago in people?
Yeah, I think so. So, and the reason why I can so clearly say that is, in my experience at the NT Institute of Sport, it was probably around just after 2010 that it started to become obvious that teenagers coming into the gym there weren't able to even support their own body weight. They couldn't, forget about doing a push-up, they couldn't even support their body weight in a plank before they even lowered down into a push-up. They couldn't do squats properly. And I think the reason for that is the introduction of smartphones, which is around 2005, 6 or 7. So these were kids that were born with, essentially with a phone in their hand. There was more and more technology after the year 2000, and so kids just didn't go out and play as much. So there wasn't all that basic locomotive stuff like running, jumping, hopping, leaping, crawling, climbing, in particular, those two, crawling and climbing. And so kids just weren't as strong in all of these positions. There is a difference between flexibility and mobility. Flexibility is length in the muscle. Mobility is movement around a joint. Mobility is much more effective. No one really cares about flexibility. You don't necessarily need longer muscles. What you need, well, that's great. Don't get me wrong, that's great and important. But what is more important is mobility through joints. And that's what's going to bulletproof your body when it comes to athletic performance and improve your athletic performance in terms of being able to jump higher, run faster.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think, is that one of the, biggest issues that you see, a lack of fitness now and the gradual decline in people taking up fitness, taking up mobility, taking up stretching?
Yeah, it's definitely, mobility is probably the most challenging thing. And so I work with a lot of long distance runners, people particularly doing half marathons. And one of the things that even they do is they just don't even do strength training. They go and do running programs, but there's no strength. And so the people that I've worked with have gone, oh, Jacob, man, when I did that program with you, I was able to get through my longer runs without any pain. Like I could do my 16K, 18K runs, for example, without any pain. Or I wasn't getting pain in my knees this time around doing this program like I did last time because they're strengthening up their body. So a lot of long distance runners don't do any strength training, and they absolutely have to. Everyone has to be doing strength training. The thing that I notice with all athletes, regardless of sport, is yes, they are lacking mobility more often than not. And so creating that, and sometimes it looks like pointless, and you do have to weigh up how important actually is this to playing the sport, particularly if it's like football and they're playing like on the weekend. You're probably not going to put it in there, but in a preseason program it would be highly valuable. Then with, say, a sprinter, for example, doing those Jefferson lift, which is the one I referred to, not to be confused with the Jefferson curl. So the Jefferson curl is the one where it looks like you're peeling your spine off the wall, going down one vertebra at a time with some light dumbbells, for example. The Jefferson lift is the one where you split and the bars between your legs. Why would you need that? Well, I think for a sprinter, particularly for someone who's down in the blocks, that's a position you're going to get into. So being able to get strong in that position is going to be effective. But then other exercises like the Steinborn squat, where you're moving from one side to the other, do you really need it? I think so, yes, because I think if you can get strong in all of these different angles and then get mobile in those, that it's going to create a solid base. So yeah, I think having mobility through strength is key, and I think that's the next big thing in strength and conditioning.
Because people talk about doing compound movements, but I guess compound movements wouldn't be as effective if you haven't built that foundation in your knees, in your joints.
Yeah, exactly. So compound movements, so the big 4 compound movements are for the upper body, shoulder press and bench press, and the lower body, squats and deadlifts. But if you can't, everyone should be able to squat ass to grass with squats, and most people can't. So if you can't, you need to look at why. Usually it's because of lack of mobility in the ankle joint. Then it's secondly, usually the knees, and then the hips. So being able to get all the way down is going to make you better at sport regardless, no matter what the sport is. There's some photos out there in tennis, for example, where the players are getting into crazy positions, and basketball, and are essentially doing splits. And, if you know exercise, you know that that's a Cossack squat, or, like whatever the exercise might be, like they're getting into these positions, and it's important that you can train for that odd occasion where you might get into that position. And even if you don't, like a sport like sprinting, where you're just running in a straight line, still being able to be strong is going to prevent you from getting any injuries and niggles. So being able to have full range of your body in every angle is highly effective.
I always wonder how tennis players don't get injured. Like, obviously they do, and obviously their knees get pretty banged up after a while, but just the sheer movement and agility they have, like their knees are getting in places that I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
And I guess it's through those training programs. Like, is that what they're focusing on?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, they're definitely doing those exercises in training. They've got they'd be doing their stretching, for their flexibility. That would still be important. But stretching is passive. So what you need is, while that's great, it works, but what you really need is active stretching. And PNF, for example, what's it stand for? Proprioneural facilitation or something, is the one where a lot of people who are sports people have probably done this down at their training, where they get a partner, you lay on your back, one leg goes up, and your partner rests, your calf on their shoulder, and then gently push it back with a straight leg to a stretch, and then they push against the shoulder for 6 seconds, and then release it. Take it back a little bit, go back again. Usually they get a little bit further. They push for 6 seconds, relax, go back, and they get a bit further. Usually you do 3 on each leg. So, and the reason why they're getting further is because it's an active stretch. And so it's an isometric contraction at that end range. And doing strength training where you're taking the body out to the end range, the safest way to do it is to isometrically contract to that end range. So you've got your 3 different types of contraction: your concentric, which is shortening; eccentric, which is lengthening; and isometric, which is a contraction, but the muscle doesn't move and doesn't change length. So taking a muscle out to its end range and then contracting, you can just contract it under body weight, but it's more effective if there's some external resistance, not a lot to begin with. And then that's what I'm talking about with those muscle fibers, creating the thickness of the fiber at that end range. And so the body is able to get out to that position and be strong in that position.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Jacob, that was fascinating. Thanks so much for that. You've got your own podcast, the Mind Your Body podcast, or is it the Mind Your Body show?
The Mind Your Body show, yeah.
The Mind Your Body show. I encourage people to check it out. It's fascinating. I listened to a few episodes on that, actually a lot. And yeah, you share some great insights. Your website as well. Do you want to shout that out?
JacobAndreae.com.
Great. And Andreae is how it's pronounced.
So JacobAndreae.
Yeah.
.com. Just Google Jacob Andreae, start typing it. It'll should hopefully pop up at this point.
Yeah. And what's the future look like for you?
The future looks like much more running programs, I think. So half marathon programs, tactical athlete is what I call them. They're people training for beep tests, whether it's fireys or police. A lot of one-on-one people I focus on are rehab clients, so people who are physically active already or play sport and have had some form of chronic injury. Usually it's shoulders, back, knees or ankles. And football. Aussie Rules football is the other major one. So the future, hopefully I can just continue to grow that. I love the podcast. I want to grow the podcast. I'd love to have you on there one day to talk about your cricket, your time playing with Steve Smith with the Australian team when they were in Darwin, and also the Hobart Hurricanes. Very impressive. And holidays, I think. That's the future. Yep. Travel. I can't wait to get back to travel.
Yeah. Where are you going to go next?
Next probably is Bali, I think, somewhere close and simple, but I've got a dream to go to Canada. I can't wait to go to Canada.
Do you like the cold?
I do, yeah. I love snowboarding.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you been skiing before? Snowboarding?
Yeah. I've been snowboarding in Idaho in the US, New Zealand, near Queenstown, Coronet Peak, and then in Victoria at Hotham.
Cool.
So, yeah, nothing compares to the US snow. Like, that was crazy. So I can't wait to get to Canada.
Yeah. Great. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks for having me.